Thanks for joining us for The Westward, read by Ashley. Today we'll be reading the following main articles: High on the High Line, Strange Journey, Just Desserts, and Melodeath Madness, following up with miscellaneous articles. The cover says, High on the High Line. Investors who planned the canal as an irrigation bonanza were left high and dry, but the trail has become a treasure in Metro Denver. By Benito L. Kelty. Letters to the Editor. Measure for Measure 11. Hannah Metzger, September 12th. Lip Service. You let Representative Monica Duran play the young and homeless single mom card in her advocating for Prop KK, firearms and ammo tax, to pay for Colorado's Crime Victim Support Fund, never mentioning that she has been one of the leading supporters for Colorado's gun control, which has been an abysmal failure, as eloquently expressed by your article, Armed and Dangerous, Volume 47, Number 31. Her virtue signaling has contributed to the state's ongoing carnage and mayhem by enacting laws that have been useless at preventing violent crime and murder. This insulting tax penalizes law-abiding gun owners who go out of their way to be law-abiding. She helped make the mess and now demands that someone else foot the bill. Meanwhile, how much of this tax will be paid by criminals when they buy black market guns and ammo? Exactly the same as what Representative Duran has contributed to improving public safety. Nothing. From Mario Acevedo, from Denver. This is not an attack on Westward. I just feel that certain reporters at other papers have stopped reporting and have even gone the extra mile to untangle Donald Trump's words. That is not reporting. Reporters today are trying something new, and I predict if it continues, it will have devastating results. You see, they forgot the two basic rules of reporting, which are to be objective and to be honest. So, following a speech by Trump, they mistakenly believe they are supposed to be interpreters, translators, and decoders. And so they look at his jumbled speech with almost no complete sentences. They reread his words as he jumps from one topic to another with the lightning speed of a flea and the attention span of a gnat. And finally, they scratch their head and make a stab at writing down what they believe Trump might have meant to say. Seriously, guys? You are decoders and translators now instead of reporters? I know you want good headlines. I, too, took journalism. But stick with the plan of reality reporting, which is to state exactly what was said. If, for example, Trump is asked exactly how he plans to lower the cost of childcare in America, then report the plans he divulged. If he did not lay out any plan, then report that. If he veered off topic and spent more time talking about tariffs than childcare, then report that. It is not your job and never was your job to try and figure out what a speaker might have meant. Reporters who travel down that path inevitably veer off the road of accuracy. I know it is fun to give opinions. After all, that's why I'm writing mine. But reporters are not talk show hosts, opinion columnists, or speech decoders. Reporters are simply supposed to report. By Rhonda Webster from Denver. You'll have to move elsewhere to make any money. Denver isn't even what it was a decade ago. There is no music scene here. By Kyle Mark from Denver. It's not just hip-hop. Electronic music, rock, rap, and even country gets looked over and dissed only because it's from Denver and not LA or New York City. It's bullshit, and newspapers like Westward and ticket companies like Ticketmaster and production companies like Live Nation are guilty of helping streamline the industry so that Colorado artists actually have to leave Colorado to make anything of themselves. By Travis Burns from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The table of contents is as follows. On page 9, High on the High Line, investors who planned the canal as an irrigation bonanza were left high and dry, but the trail has become a treasure in Metro Denver. By Benito L. Kelty. Page 12, Strange Journey. Henry Award-winning 2-cent Lion Theater stages The Rocky Horror Show. By Tony Tresca. Page 15, Just Desserts. These not-too-sweet treats are stunners, by Molly Martin. Page 19, Melodeath Madness. Night Wraith celebrates an album release at the High Dive with an all-local bill, by Justin Criado. Page 12, Culture. Page 15, Cafe. Page 19, Music. Concerts and Clubs, page 22. Page 27, Marijuana. Cannabis Calendar, page 27. Ask a Stoner, page 28. High on the High Line. The South Platte River rushes out of the Rocky Mountains through a canyon molded between grassy hills. 2 miles below Waterton Canyon, 71 miles of trail stretch through the plains well into Aurora. The High Line Canal may never have become the liquid asset it was intended to become, but today it's one of Metro Denver's greatest amenities. In 1880, James Duff saw the low valley in this part of the arid plains and envisioned building the biggest irrigation canal in the American West. Duff was a businessman, a Scottish immigrant who'd organized a Confederate Texas cavalry during the Civil War, fled to Mexico where the Union won, then rebuilt his life in Denver. After opening the elegant Windsor Hotel downtown, he became vice president of the Colorado Mortgage and Investment Company, the most prolific canal builder in the state, according to National Park Service archives. He began working alongside Englishman James Barclay, his fellow vice president at CM&I, engineer Edwin Nettleton, and engineer and entrepreneur and future Colorado governor Benjamin Harrison Eaton, who'd been trying to build a large canal project in Larimer County. The group had it in mind to build a gravity-fed canal based on the High Line principle, which suggested moving water from the highest elevation point possible to lower levels through a ditch. Duff believed the best place to start this High Line Canal was Waterton Canyon, the final passage for the South Platte River from the Rocky Mountains to the yawning Great Plains. Eaton, an Ohio native who came out to Colorado to strike it rich during the state's gold rush, liked the High Line principle because it would allow him to carry water farther. He promised Duff that they could build the longest canal west of the Mississippi, 71 miles, and irrigate 120,000 acres of land. Construction crews working for Eaton began building the canal in the spring of 1880 with 160 teams of ditch diggers recruited through newspaper ads offering $1 a day plus board. Using shovels and donkeys but no machinery, the diggers worked nonstop until November 30th, 1883, completing the High Line at a cost of $650,000. It wasn't as large as the Erie Canal, the giant 180-mile waterway that awed Eaton in his youth, but it was the largest irrigation canal built in the West and the most expensive. To stay on the most elevated point, the canal meandered through the dry, arid grasslands of Douglas, Arapahoe, Denver, and Adams counties. It ran alongside farmlands and ranches built on land sold by members of Duff's group, including railroad magnate Jay Gould, who spurred the project to attract settlers to land he owned east of Denver. But the South Platte River proved unpredictable, and the water rights that Duff had secured were weak and too junior. In the first few years of the High Line's operation, Duff managed only 1,200 cubic feet of water per second, or 651,000 gallons of water a day, which would only be enough to irrigate 60,000 acres of land, half as much as Duff had hoped. Worse yet, the canal had problems with seepage, water evaporation, and carrying the water the full 71 miles. The diversion dam and sluice gates, which allowed additional water to pass, were sturdy, but the sand and gravel that traveled with the water blocked the gates and other parts of the headworks that surrounded the dam. Gophers also tended to burrow into the banks of the canal, weakening the walls. As a result, the High Line Canal was only going to be able to irrigate 50,000 acres at best, but the reality turned out much worse. In its first few years of operation, it only managed to irrigate 20,000 acres of cultivated land, mostly in Douglas and Arapahoe counties. Water wouldn't even travel out of Arapahoe County except during heavy rainfall, and that was rare. Farmers were angry that their crops along the Highline Canal were failing. In 1892, farmer David Richards successfully sued Duff's Northern Colorado Irrigation Company, a CM&I subsidiary created to manage the canal, for damages for crops he lost between 1884 and 1889. The lawsuit set the stage for other farmers to sue, and the company became entangled in constant, costly litigation. The English ditch was a blunder, read a 1902 Denver Times article using one of the canal's nicknames to distinguish it from the Farmers Highline Canal that began near Golden and the Rocky Ford Highline Canal that starts near Manzanola. The ditch has been losing an investment to the owners. It cannot get enough water legally, and there is reason to believe that it cannot succeed in stealing enough. A new group of investors, including some from CM&I, formed the Antero and Lost Park Reservoir Company with the goal of building a new water district west of Pikes Peak with storage dams that could deliver more water to the Highline Canal through another major waterway project. But then the company decided instead to just buy the Highline Canal for $600,000, believing its engineers could improve the water flow. In 1913, the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that the city of Denver had the right to build or buy its own water plant, and the city responded by asking the Denver Public Utilities Commission to find a reliable long-term water source. After studying options near Clear Creek and the Blue River, among others, a consulting engineer from Los Angeles recommended in 1914 that Denver buy the Highline Canal. Denver City Council refused to give the Public Utilities Commission additional funds for more studies of the Highline Canal, however, and the resulting feud led to city leaders putting a question on the May 1915 municipal ballot asking whether the commission should be dissolved. Voters rejected the idea. By August 1915, the commission saw that city leaders weren't interested in putting a single penny into buying the Highline Canal, so it went ahead and bought the canal secretly for $1.1 million from the Antero and Lost Park Reservoir Company. In 1920, after 165 days of trial, the Colorado Supreme Court decided that the commission had the power to buy the canal. The Antero and Lost Park Reservoir Company retained control of the canal until May 24, 1924. After that, the Highline Canal became property of Denver Water, an agency formed in 1918 that replaced the city's Public Utilities Commission. This wasn't the last time the city would find itself all wet where the Highline was concerned. After it took ownership of the Highline in 1924, Denver Water continued trying to deliver water along all 71 miles, but it estimated that it lost between 60 to 80% of the water to evaporation and other challenges. As the cottonwoods that sprang up along the canal grew, they began sucking up 20,000 gallons a year. The Highline Canal rarely flowed the full 71 miles. The city of Aurora, which changed its name from Fletcher in 1928, has rarely seen any South Platte River water, notes Harriet Crittenden Lemire, who eventually became involved in stewarding the canal as head of the Highline Canal Conservancy. When water did come down the canal, residents used it recreationally. They tied ropes to branches and made swings to fly into the canal. They swam in it or floated down it. Kids looked for salamanders and toads left in the muddy ditch of the canal after rainy days, Lemire recalls. In the 1960s, Denver Water began to consider turning the service road that ran alongside the canal into an official trail. Like the canal itself, the accompanying service road crosses Jefferson, Douglas, Arapahoe, Denver, and Adams counties. The road was originally for, quote, ditch drivers to travel between the 165 head gates and direct water at different parts of the canal, but now the thought was to use it for recreation. In March 1970, the South Suburban Parks and Recreation District, which had formed in 1959 to create parks for multiple cities south of the city and county of Denver, came to an agreement with Denver Water to use 18 miles of the service road as a trail dedicated to hiking and horseback riding, according to Denver Water. Later that same year, Denver Water agreed to let Aurora use 12 miles of the service road for recreation. 4 years later, Denver Water began planning to develop 13 miles of the service road into a trail. It then finalized an agreement with the state of Colorado to do the same for the remaining portions of the road. Today, that road is a trail whose composition changes from county to county. The first few miles south of Chatfield State Park are bare and rough, uncrowded by the trees that stick close to the canal. At some points, the trail is just a bumpy dirt road with small, muddy pools of water and tire tracks and balls of horse manure nearby. As the trail approaches newer housing developments in Douglas County, it's paved smooth with concrete like a sidewalk and travels past freshly erected park canopies and gazebos where you can rest in the shade. In Arapahoe County, portions that are still dirt give way to gravel for miles before the trail winds farther into Cherry Hills Village, where it's paved with blacktop. In Cherry Hills Village, the trees and the houses close in on the trail and shade it for miles, pushing flies and mosquitoes that hang around the damp bed of the canal closer to the trail. The ranches turn to mansions, and suddenly the High Line is in South Denver, winding past churches and under busy roads. It begins to hit more traffic lights and crosswalks where cars have to yield. This is the only trail in the metropolitan area that crosses Interstates 25, 225, and 70, and it does so quietly, with mural and graffiti-painted tunnels taking it through underpasses hidden from motorists. In East Denver, the trail hits a rise, offering a look at how far it's traveled from the foothills of the Front Range and how far it has to go through backyards with short fences behind drab apartment complexes. The High Line Canal tangles with the Cherry Creek Trail for a few miles near the Denver and Aurora border around Havana Street before it abandons Hampden Avenue and C-470 to head due north. In northern Aurora, before it reaches Green Valley Ranch, the land looks as high and dry as it did in Douglas County, but the trail is freshly paved and feels smooth under bike tires and hard under feet. An overpass opened in June that crosses over Pena Boulevard. The trail ends in Green Valley Ranch, a few miles south of Denver International Airport. This high point on the plains offers a panoramic view of development projects currently encroaching on the area. In a recreation-crazed city, the High Line Canal was a hit, but maintaining it proved a big job. So in 2014, fans formed the High Line Canal Conservancy. Nonprofit dedicated to stewarding the trail alongside its government partners. Harriet Lemaire, who raised her kids near the High Line, has been the CEO since the start of the organization. The group started small with cleanup days and community projects, but was soon thinking big. Today it has $67 million in federal and state funding and is raising another $33 million with a big benefit slated for September 20th in Aurora. From 2025 to 2029, the Conservancy will use that $100 million to improve the trail's connectivity by closing gaps around Plum Creek in Littleton, at Wellshire Golf Course in Denver, and near I-70 in Aurora, adding new trails, bridges, and underpasses and smoothing surfaces all along the way. It's also putting up educational signage about the wildlife and plants along the trail and about the history of the High Line Canal. And there's still plenty of history to be made. While the Conservancy has been taking an increasingly important role in the High Line Canal, Denver Water began to hand off ownership of the canal this spring, keeping only a 45-mile stretch that goes through Green Valley Ranch and assigning the rest to Arapahoe County. Denver could have taken on a portion but declined, just as it had over a century ago. The city had budgeting concerns about maintenance, while Arapahoe County was ready and had plans and funding in place. Denver Water worked collaboratively with the Denver Department of Parks and Recreation, the Denver City Attorney, Arapahoe County, and the High Line Conservancy to move forward with the conveyance of the land to Arapahoe County, but with an understanding that when Denver is ready, the city can take the Denver parcel back. In the meantime, Arapahoe County is converting the ditch into a stormwater system while continuing to encourage recreational use of the trail. According to Greenwood Village, it's, quote, one of the most popular and treasured areas of the city. As a trail, the Highline Canal found new life. It's one of the longest contiguous urban trails in the country and is used by about 1 million people a year as a walking, biking, and equestrian trail. It's used for irrigation very infrequently, says Lemaire. It's better known as a recreational trail. Author David Scarry, who wrote Meandering Through Time, A History of the Highline Canal, says that even though it flopped as an irrigation project, it inspired bigger schemes that went on to help Colorado residents claim water and survive in the arid climate of Denver. It was very instrumental, Scarry says. The building of the Highline Canal was a radical departure from anything that had been built in its time, and it gave people the idea, hey, look what can be done. It was surpassed only by more grandiose projects, and the story of Colorado is water reclamation. Part of the trail's value is that it ties the metro area together while still displaying the character of the different communities, Lemaire says. It passes by stables with horses and goats and parks with children and dogs. Even if it failed in its initial mission, its creators should be proud of what they did. What would those people think today? Wouldn't they be so pleased? Lemaire muses. Sometimes what happens is people have an idea and it changes, but I don't think anyone, not even a landscape architect, could have designed something like the Highline Canal. Strange Journey. Henry Award-winning 2-Cent Lion Theater stages The Rocky Horror Show by Tony Tresca. 2-Cent Lion Theater is closing out its first residency year at the People's Building with a bang and plenty of fishnets by presenting its first musical, The Rocky Horror Show. The cult classic is an ideal fit for the emergent company, which has made a name for itself through LGBTQ+ stories, inventive staging, and a fearless approach to unconventional productions. This is a dream production of mine, says director Tamara Nelson. I'm a big fan of horror movies, musicals, and campy things, and this is right in the intersection of all my favorite things. As I read the script over and over, it's funny and silly, but Rocky also has a darker underbelly about people who don't fit into mainstream culture, which feels relevant today. The upcoming production of the Rocky Horror Show, which will run from September 21st through October 5th, is a symbol of how far 2-Cent Lion has come since its founding in 2022. The musical also wraps up a whirlwind year at the People's Building, where the group will return for 3 more shows next season as a returning resident. 2-Cent was able to secure an initial contract after the building's former resident troupe, Pop-Up Theater, disbanded because its artistic director failed to pay artists in a disastrous production of Corpus Christi last year. I knew the People's Building was looking for a queer resident company, and I had a hunch that they had some dates available in 2024, says Kevin Douglas, 2-Cent's executive marketing and education director. I emailed a pitch to curator Aaron Vega, and he called me later that day and offered us 3 slots, an amazing ticket split deal, and a huge sandbox that we could play in. Taking over the coveted residency was both an opportunity and a significant challenge, which the young company has met with determination and creativity. 2-Cent was founded in 2022 by University of Denver alumni and friends Douglas, Gracie Jacobson, and Izzy Churn to fill the local theater community's lack of opportunities for queer artists. It's been a bit of a trial by fire as we go because we haven't done it before, says Jacobson, 2-Cent's managing director, resident producer, and associate artistic director. Besides the experience we've had in college, we're learning everything on the job. We're really lucky to have a community that we can learn from, but I think one of the biggest things for me is what we keep hearing from people. Be careful the amount you grow, how fast you grow, and in which direction you grow. We've been thinking about that a lot because it's just the 3 of us, and the fear is that we'll take on more than we can handle before we can hire more people to help us out, so we're being mindful of that. Since its inception, 2-Cent has produced 6 successful productions, establishing a reputation for powerful queer-centric storytelling. The company's first season in residency at the People's Building, which began in January, has seen 2 Cent expand its ambitions, taking on larger productions and refining its craft. The year began with a more fully realized remount of Clink, Clink, A Love Story, a nostalgic queer coming-of-age story about the 1990s and early 2000s, written by Douglas that cost $7,100. Then, in June, 2 Cent presented the immersive Josie's Diner, about a haven for the LGBTQ+ community, as part of the Denver Fringe Festival at the Butcher Block Cafe in Reno and its home base, the People's Building, for $5,900. Perhaps the most exciting news of the season for 2 Cent came just days after the successful opening of Josie's Diner on June 16th. The company had been nominated for 6 Henry Awards, aka the Colorado Tony Awards, for its production of Clink, which tied it with much larger institutions such as the Denver Center for the Performing Arts and Miners Alley Playhouse. The Colorado Theater Guild presented 2 Cent with 2 Henry Awards in July for Sound and Lighting Design Tier 2, cementing its place among Denver's rising theater companies. It meant the world to me to be recognized by the Henrys, says Maxwell O'Neill, who won for his lighting design. And to be nominated 6 times alongside my college friends, an absolute dream. I fully convinced myself that I was not going to win against the much bigger theaters, both in budget and literal size. When the first syllable of my name was called, my friends next to me screamed so loud that it took me a second to really process that my name was called. Riding high on its Henry wins, 2 Cent is now gearing up for its most ambitious project to date. The Rocky Horror Show is the company's first musical production, with the largest creative team it's had and a $22,000 budget, which is 3 times larger than that of previous productions. The story begins with sweethearts Brad and Janet, who find themselves stuck with a flat tire during a storm. Seeking shelter, they stumble upon the eerie mansion of Dr. Frankenfurter, where their innocence is lost and they encounter wild characters, elaborate dances, and rock songs as Frank unveils his latest creation, a muscular man named Rocky. This project has been over a year in the making, notes Churn, 2 Cent's artistic and technical director. Tamara brought the idea to do Rocky last July or August, and we were thinking about doing it last fall. But as we thought about it, we realized that if we were going to do Rocky, we wanted to do it right. Part of that included securing a collaboration with Colorado's Elusive Ingredient, the state's largest and longest-running Rocky Horror Picture Show Shadowcast, which performed at the Esquire Theater's monthly screenings for 24 years until the movie theater closed in July. 2 of the 8 performances will be special late-night Midnight Madness shows, during which audience members will receive special bags with props, play pre-show games, and interact with the performance using traditional call and response that fans of the film screenings know and love. Our partnership with Colorado's Elusive Ingredient has been one of our biggest advantages, Douglas says. They've been really great at publicizing us, and we've helped publicize for them. They're lending us certain set pieces and props. We will have some of their people with us for our Midnight Madness performances, which will make it much easier for audiences to participate in the musical, and has been a huge help with marketing. But 2 Cent isn't just recreating the iconic movie experience. Nelson has made it a priority to focus her directorial approach on the script itself and bring fresh ideas to the table. Recreating the movie just didn't excite me, Nelson explained. I wanted to explore what the script had to offer. By letting go of the expectations tied to the film, we were able to open up creatively, and my designers came up with so many interesting, original ideas that we wouldn't have if we had been trying to focus on creating a replica of the film. Nelson and the creative team have leaned into the campy horror movie elements of the show, while also drawing inspiration from 1950s B-movies, John Waters films, and drag culture. This whole musical is a love letter to horror movies from the 50s to the early 70s, Nelson says. We're leaning into that dramatic Vincent Price style while also paying homage to the world of drag queens and John Waters. I watched Paris is Burning like 5 times, thinking about Frank and the world that he might have been creating in the castle. Our Rocky Horror lives at the intersection of The Day the Earth Stood Still, Old Frankenstein movies, and RuPaul's Drag Race. For Nelson, the show can be summed up in a single line. Don't dream it, be it. The Rocky Horror Show, she says, is about creating a safe space with no limits or boundaries where the audience and performers can feel comfortable being whatever they want to be. Similar to Brad and Janet, you may enter the show thinking you're one way and then realize when you see Frank and Rocky that you're a little bit more fluid than you thought you were, Nelson says. Anybody who's looking to have a really fun, silly time is welcome, and they might just discover something new about themselves along the way. The Rocky Horror Show, Saturday, September 21st through October 5th at the People's Building, 9995 East Colfax Avenue, Aurora. Learn more at 2centlion.com. Just Desserts. These not-too-sweet treats are stunners, by Molly Martin. It came to me in a dream, says pastry chef Hannah Lavoie of what's quickly become the most popular dessert at Sequita Restaurante y Bar, the new Mexican restaurant from the team behind Pan Latin Eatery, Lucina in Park Hill, and Create Kitchen and Bar at Stanley Marketplace. The Tezcalate is a corn-shaped play on Mexican hot chocolate that provides the perfect closing note to a meal at this buzzy new restaurant where the rich history of Mexico's food culture takes center stage. Lavoie grew up in New Jersey and is Italian and French. She moved to Denver in 2016 and was working at the now-closed Mondo Market at Stanley Marketplace when she met Erasmo Raz Casiano and Diego Coconati. When I heard that Raz was opening up Lucina in 2022, it was just really appealing to me, Lavoie recalls. I just loved his and Diego's energy. She also loved the idea of challenging herself by veering away from the Italian cuisine she grew up with and her French baking school training and moving into something totally new. Pushing the boundaries, pushing my creativity, and learning something new every day is something I aspire to do. As Coconati and Casiano were getting ready to open Sequita, I was honored enough to be asked to do the desserts here too, she says. I just love the culture and the food of Mexico. That's what really inspires me so much. I think a lot of people have the misconception that Mexican food is just tacos or desserts like arroz con leche, but it's so much more than that. Here's her sweet treat as well as 3 more. In developing the dessert lineup, I really wanted to make sure that we were hitting the nose on what you would get in Mexico City if you were walking around in the streets, Lavoie notes. The inspiration for the tezcalate came from a conversation she and Casiano had about the history of corn. Roz was talking about how Columbus accidentally came across the Cuban islands in Mexico, she recalls. He was looking for gold originally, but unbeknownst to him, he was looking at the gold all along, not really knowing it, because Mexicans have a saying that without corn, there is no life. And they mean that truly because of the value that it holds. I wanted to replicate that piece of history and honor the corn by showcasing it. The main component of the dessert is Mexican hot chocolate ice cream that contains some more savory notes, including ground corn. It's served in the shape of a cob of corn. Lavoie made the original mold at home, DIY style, then sent her design to a company that created the molds she's using now. The cob-shaped ice cream is served with caramelized white chocolate and is painted gold as a nod to the value of corn, but also as a little nudge to Columbus like, hey, here's your gold, Lavoie says. Also for me, it's a little bit of a mindfuck because traditionally it's a hot chocolate drink, and I still wanted to uphold that, but also be like, it doesn't have to be hot. We can have fun with it. That playfulness has resonated with guests. When it comes to the table, everyone else around is like, what is that? Some people think it's not dessert. They think someone just ordered corn. Lavoie's corn-inspired dessert seems poised to become a signature at Chiquita, and it's one of several notable sweet treats that you can find on menus around town right now. Amitsu at Kumoya, 2400 West 32nd Avenue, kumoyadenver.com. At Kumoya, the Japanese eatery that opened in the former Tony P's in the Highland neighborhood last October, Chef Corey Baker and pastry chef William O'Leary, known to many as Willy Wonka, teamed up on a parfait-like dessert that combines many different ingredients. Enmitsu is a traditional dessert that uses multiple flavors, textures, and preparations to create an entire universe in a bowl, Baker says. We use both Japanese and Filipino ingredients in our enmitsu, and along with taking a zuki bean and turning it into a chocolate mousse and finishing it with an Okinawa black sugar syrup. The colorful ingredients are layered artfully in a glass, and the flavors are all complementary, balanced, and not overly sweet, Baker notes. Starting from the top, there are juicy strawberries, a lightly sour shikuwasa sorbet with hints of orange, and a Zuki red bean chocolate mousse that is earthy and smooth, diving past the black sugar syrup through a coconut tapioca with larger pearls of creamy delight, even deeper to the bottom of the dish with perfectly cut small cubes of aloe gelée that will jump around your mouth and chase the flavors. Wildflower honey semifreddo at Wildflower Honey Semifreddo at Wildflower, 3638 Navajo Street, lifehousehotels.com/hotels/Denver/Lower Highlands. Aidan Tibbetts was just 22 years old when he helped open Wildflower inside the Lifehouse Hotel in Lohi in 2020 under then executive chef William Harris. Within just a few months, he became the executive chef and has since built an impressive culinary program that manages to playfully pay homage to the eatery's name without leaning too precious or gimmicky. Tibbetts prioritizes using local ingredients, including produce and edible flowers grown in his mother's garden in southeast Aurora. Those flowers garnish what's become the restaurant's signature dessert, the Wildflower Honey Semifreddo, an early invention from Harris that Tibbetts has refined over time. It's made using honey from local producer B Squared Apiaries. Owner Beth Conray is amazing, Tibbetts says. She has beehives all over Colorado. It's just beautiful, beautiful honey, so we just made that the highlight of the dessert. The main component is a, quote, super custard-heavy semifreddo that gives you more of that decadent ice cream vibe, Tibbetts explains. That's paired with toasted oats that are reminiscent, in a good way, of crunchy Nature Valley granola bars and honey brittle. It's 4 different versions of honey, he continues. One that's toasted into the oats and gets that nutty aspect. One that's just the honey drizzled over it. There's a huge amount of the honey in the semifreddo itself, and then the honey brittle, which we press into these beehive-looking molds to get the shape. And then I found the beehive bowls that we're using at World Market. We've kind of elevated it and made it more bee-oriented as time's gone on. Another addition was the Marsala foam, which lends, quote, a little bit of saline, a little bit of oxidation to round out the palate. Tibbetts says, resulting in a honey-centric dish that's still balanced and not cloyingly sweet. Crémieux et melon at Noisette, 3254 Navajo Street, noisettedenver.com. Lillian Liu, who owns Low-Hi French eatery Noisette with her husband Tim, is a French pastry wizard. During the day, you can taste her creations at the bakery portion of the eatery. At night, no meal should end without her dessert. Since the restaurant's debut in 2022, Liu's desserts, which are often paired with seasonal fruit, have been a standout. The tarte tropézienne, currently paired with Palisade peaches and raspberries, has become a staple, but there's a new seasonal dessert featuring a less commonly used Colorado-grown favorite that's reason to visit sooner than later. All my life, fresh melons made my throat and mouth itchy when I ate them, says Liu. But she did develop an affinity for Melona bars, a creamy South Korean ice pop that comes in a variety of flavors, including honeydew. You can find them in the freezer section at H Mart. Inspired by the state's beloved Rocky Ford melons, Liu created her first ever melon dessert, which will only be on the menu until the supply runs out, and that could be as soon as next week. To create a texture reminiscent of Melona bars, Liu made a crémieux with white chocolate for its creaminess and crème fraîche for tang. On top of that is a Lillet gelée, because Lillet and melon is kind of a nice French combination, she says. The Rocky Ford melon slices are shingled on top, and the dish is garnished with toasted pistachios for some crunch. The resulting dessert is rich and decadent in texture, but also tastes very clean and fresh. The best compliment you can get from an Asian person is that your dessert is not too sweet, Liu notes. Goal achieved. Melodeath Madness. Night Wraith celebrates an album release at the High Dive with an all-local bill. By Justin Criado. Night Wraith is back with a new album and it absolutely rips. After the Blackened Melodeath outfit released Offering in 2022, a strong sophomore record in its own right, the 5-piece spent the majority of the past 2 years hitting the stage and local circuit. But the members were also quietly concocting fresh material as their new bassist's home studio. We supported Offering as much as we could. We weren't able to do proper touring on it because, we're all old and have careers and families, says Benjamin Pitts, Night Wraith's crimson-bearded guitarist and vocalist. We did a lot of Weekend Warrior stuff, which was cool. Then the past couple years, we've been hard at work writing this record. The band's third offering, Divergence, which dropped on September 13th via Colorado Springs label What's Left Records, lands as a focused and polished product with a carefully crafted sonic direction that's uniquely Night Wraith. 2 previously released singles, Whispers of Dragonflies and Perpetual Night, served as perfect teasers to the eclectic collection, which is equal parts death metal brutality and synthwave whimsy. There are even some classical moments across Divergence's 9 tracks, which include the heaviest cover of Pink Floyd's Us and Them you've ever heard. Pitts says that he, Jacob St. Amand, bass, Caleb Jose Tardillo, keyboards and synthesizer, Igor Panasowicz, guitar, and Isidro Spy Soto, drums, intentionally explored some uncharted and surprising territory. I think we finally found the sound that we've always been looking for, he says. We've been a band for 8 years now, so these things take time, but this is really what we always wanted Night Wraith to sound like. We finally just pinned it down a little bit better. The group facetiously called its sound Blackened Dad Rock in the past, but it's become so much more. The technicality and variety of musicianship, the composition of each song and release, the way it all just works so well. Curious readers can see and hear Night Wraith for themselves at the band's release show on Friday, September 27th at the High Dive, the group's unofficial home base. Necropanther, Upon a Field's Whisper, and Lacerated round out the all-local bill. On Offering, Night Wraith, which included founding bassist J.J. Hilger at the time, went more of a classic rock route, specifically leaning on Tardio's skills behind a Hammond B3 organ. But this time around, Tardio broke out the synth to give Divergence a fitting retro wave vibe. We wanted it to sound more cinematic. We wanted it to sound like all the 80s sci-fi and horror movies that we love, like John Carpenter kind of stuff, Pitts explains. Caleb did a lot of work honing his synth sound and finding a way to blend that properly with the songs to where it didn't feel out of place. Saint Amand, who officially joined Night Wraith last year after producing Offering, agrees. Other than handling bass now, he also assumed the producer role for Divergence. The music was written with the addition of the synth in mind, probably more than the last one, he says. We really gave him free range to come up with cool synth sounds for each song, and it was very easy to work with from a production standpoint. The addition of Saint Amand shouldn't be overlooked either, Pitts is quick to point out. He was basically the sixth member of the band anyway, learning the songs in and out, making that production happen, he explains. So after we already worked with him for Offering, we had this comfortability with him. He was our first choice, and he said yes. Other than drums, which were tracked at the band cave, everything else was laid down at Saint Amand's spot, affectionately referred to in the liner notes as Sonny's lair, a nod to the bassist Pup, who has, quote, been a part of all the recordings, Saint Amand says. He does kind of own the place, he quips. He's a good boy, Pitts adds. While Sonny doesn't make a proper cameo on Divergence, the album can be seen as a love letter of sorts to the Denver music scene. We went real heavy with collaborations this time, Pitts admits, selecting some of the city's best players in their respective fields. Cole Rudy, the pedal steel guitar player from Dragon Deer, lends his chops on Perpetual Night, which is an otherwise in-your-face blackened melodeath banger. We've all been in bands with him back in the day, Pitts says. He's even mentioned that he couldn't think of literally any examples where there's pedal steel guitar in this type of extreme music. Neither can we. Same goes for flute. On Whispers of Dragonflies, Kelly Schilling of Dreadnought breaks out a flute solo that would make Jethro Tull's Ian Anderson blush with envy. The collabs don't stop there. For One Flower, Andy Wilde of Nathaniel Ratliff and the Night Sweats, whom Pitts refers to as a super old friend, busts out a baritone saxophone that's so fitting it's hard to imagine the song without it. Then Wayfarer guitarist Joe Strong Tresilli provides a soaring solo for Invocation. He and Pitts used to play in a Death Clock cover band, and the instrumental track is reminiscent of that beloved fictional cartoon group. He's probably my favorite metal ripper in Denver, Pitts says of Strong Tresilli. Fallen Kings and Queens is the most heartfelt song on Divergence, as it primarily serves as a tribute to the late Plains Mistaken for Stars vocalist and guitarist Garrett O'Donnell, who passed away at 44 in 2021 after a brief battle with esophageal cancer, and features backup vocals from former Plains bassist and guitarist Chuck French. It's kind of like a commemoration for Garrett, Pitts says. Garrett is one of the fallen kings mentioned in the song, and it was really cool having Chuck, someone who was so connected to him and toured with him for years and years, to do a little guest vocal on that. Pitts hints that there might even be a surprise guest appearance during the release show. The date is approaching so quickly, and we haven't had time to focus on that, he muses. It'd probably be easier to bring a flute on stage than a pedal steel or guitar amp. Either way, Night Wraith will play Divergence in its entirety for the first time at the High Dive. Aside from the Pink Floyd cover that closes it all out, a song Pitts considers more of a bonus track than part of the record's overall arch, Divergence explores themes of humanity's role in and future with AI. The thread that binds it all together is technology, he explains. That wasn't the idea going into it, but as I was finishing up the lyrics and trying to find a theme to tie everything together, Since AI has been a topic of conversation lately, those things were knocking around in my mind, especially with the title track. It's basically about how we're at a crux in humanity, and there are these different paths that humanity can take that will probably have drastically different consequences to them that has to do with technology, he continues. If you know us, we're leaning on the side of going away from technology and establishing a connection with nature. It's more of a warning against maybe we shouldn't go all in on technology. Divergence doesn't come across as dire as that might sound, though, especially since the music is so damn catchy and fantastical at times. It helps that the lyrics aren't too on the nose either. There's always an optimistic tinge to it, Saint Amand says of Pitz's songwriting. It's not that overly oppressive and negative. Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, Pitts concludes. It's more like, this is how bad it could be, but be like Night Wraith. We're offering you the solution. And even if you're not necessarily seeking total salvation, you'll find a brief reprieve from it all with Divergence. Godspeed. Good Health by Justin Criado. Rarely is Scott Hansen stumped regarding inspiration or what to do next with Tycho, his longtime EDM project. But that's exactly what happened to him, albeit briefly, after he released his 6th album, Simulcast, in 2020. He's been granted a lot of unexpected downtime over the past 4 years. I had the benefit of time and space to reflect on the music and come to understand it a little better, says the San Francisco-based producer and musician. The result is a new record, Infinite Health, which was released on August 30th. Hansen says it marks a new era for Tycho, which now includes guitarist Zach Brown, drummer Rory O'Connor, and vocalist Hannah Cottrell. Billy Kim, on bass and keyboard synth, is a touring member too. It wasn't Hansen's intention to start a new period for himself and his band, but as Tycho has continuously evolved since he started it as a solo endeavor back in 2001, he knows to accept whatever the natural next steps are. It just is. It doesn't matter what my intentions were, it just is, he muses. There's the earlier stuff that's just me messing around in my spare time. That was up until 2010. Then we got the band together and started touring off of Dive, 2011. Then the 3 albums, Dive, Awake, 2014, and Epoch, 2016, was certainly an era. Once that wrapped up, I felt I wanted to do something pretty different and did the vocal album with Weather, 2019. He can dissect it in a more digestible way looking back, but none of it was necessarily planned, he notes. Then COVID hit, and that was my cue to be like, it's time for a break. I took a lot of time off, Hansen admits, explaining that the reprieve allowed him to become more of a family man. Of course, he still worked on music, which is as natural as brushing his teeth at this point. But without the pressure of rolling deadlines and crisscross tour runs, Hansen really ruminated on what he wanted Tycho to be moving forward, which was easier said than done. It felt like I didn't know where to go with it, he admits. I think my intention was to go back to where I started, but with a new perspective on it and new tools and outlook, and see where that led me. As a result, Infinite Health, which is an instrumental album like most of Tycho's releases, was, quote, very reflected upon and thought out, he says. I wrote just so much material. I got into a rhythm of writing at least just an idea every day. Whether or not it became a full-fledged composition depended on the song and the day, Hansen continues. With the 9 new tracks in tow, Tycho is back on the road. The group will play Denver on Wednesday, September 25th at Mission Ballroom. Nisaya is also on the bill. In a perfect world, Hansen prefers to live with his songs as long as possible, or at least until he believes they are fully formed and ultimately finished. When you're developing them like that, you react to the previous song from the previous day, like, okay, that was a cool sound, what if I use it this way? It just all compounds, so by the time you have the final set of songs, they're a little bit more thought out and reflect the maturity of the ideas, he explains of writing Infinite Health. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening to The Westward. My name is Ashley.